Made to Kill. By Zekamp. Chapter 31. How does a maid sneak? It was the morning of the big day. The operation was due to start in 16 hours, and Fayette was feeling grumpy. There were many reasons for her grumpiness, the first of which was perhaps rather typical: the weather. Something had changed in the wind overnight, and the smoke from the factories had been blown downwards, enveloping the district in a thick smog. Normally she may have overlooked it, but after last night's events, Fayette could not help noticing that the wind from the sea was blowing the smog distinctly northwards, away from the richer southern district, and right into the poorer worker districts. Was that an accident, or perhaps also by design? After waking up and seeing the smog, Fayette had felt like it was an omen for the day, though she didn't know if it was good or bad. The second, and more active source of annoyance, was that their operation was to be a stealthy one. She could handle a bit of sneaking about, but a whole mission of it? It really wasn't her style. Her preferred method was more run in and hit things in the face with a broom. How was a maid supposed to be properly stealthy? Well, not however she was currently trying to be. This is hopeless. The way you move about it brings in too much attention. Keep your head down low. Fayette winced back from the doctor's harsh words and slowly rose up to her full posture. She brushed some dirt off from her uniform, and tried to explain herself. Look, I can't just go crawling and creeping all over. My uniform would get much too dirty. Shoes were invented for a reason, you know. Olivia looked at the stubborn maid blankly for a moment, then took out her pocket flask, drank deeply from it, and said some inventive curses Fayette made sure to memorize for later. She had already learned many phrases from this training session. Yes, training session. It was an idea Mireille had put forward on hearing that Fayette was close to leveling up. It was a simple plan. Perhaps if she focused herself on sneaking about for a bit and tried to get some experience while at it, she would get some type of stealth skill on her level up. Olivia had seconded the motion, and offered to act as teacher. The woman apparently had some experience sneaking about. Fayette wasn't sure where exactly a doctor would get such experience, but she did seem to know her stuff. As far as Fayette could judge, her advice was solid. Fayette just had a hard time putting it into practice, and Olivia was losing her patience. How do you expect to sneak around if you have to stay on your feet the whole time? Some things require getting down and dirty. Fayette felt her temper flare up just a bit, and gestured around the dilapidated warehouse they were practicing in. This place is absolutely covered in filth. A maid is someone who clears such things away, not someone who rolls around in it. She pointed at the doctor. Besides, aren't you a doctor? Doctors should also stay clean and stuff. Right? You shouldn't be getting dirty either. Olivia quirked a brow and lowered her voice. Don't call me a doctor when we are out in public, especially in a loud voice like that. Now, do you think it's easy to procure fresh corpses from a graveyard? People keep a watch on those. A real doctor has to get down and dirty. Fayette clamped down, silenced by the words. Yes, she was learning. Not much about being sneaky, but very much about this strange doctor. First of all, the woman seemed to have many talents unbefitting of a doctor. She had brought Fayette into this dilapidated warehouse in the slums without any hesitation, as if such places were natural to her. Second, she seemed to be very testy about things said out in public. At times, the word doctor seemed almost like a curse to her, one she avoided with all her might. However, when she spoke the word herself, there was a strange pride to it. A contrast. The doctor ran her eyes over Fayette, and did not seem to approve. She shook her head and took another swig from her pocket flask. I honestly don't know what to do about you. First of all that white on your uniform brings too much attention. How do you expect to blend into the shadows if you are plastered with white all over? Fayette sighed and leaned down on her broom. It's true, I'm not being a very good student here. A stealth mission, and I'm failing at the very first step. Is there anything I can do to remedy this? She looked at her teacher, but the doctor seemed to be lost deep in her mind, trying to think of some way to figure things out. Fayette felt like just standing around would be wasting time, so she took out her broom and started sweeping the place. Maybe if I clean this place up a bit, I'll be able to focus better and figure out some way. Some time passed like that, with Fayette sweeping away through the warehouse and the doctor lost in her thoughts. The sound of her broom sweeping back and forth became steady and rhythmic, echoing through the dim room like a steady drum. Eventually, the doctor's head jerked back up, and she looked towards Fayette. Her face turned thoughtful. For a moment there, I almost forgot you were here. That sweeping, it lulls into you. Fayette nodded, and kept at it. It is pretty relaxing in a way. After I get into it, other thoughts fade away and I can just focus on my broom. I barely even realize what's happening around me. Olivia nodded slowly, then looked at the maid again, this time with measuring eyes. I think, this might be an answer. She turned around, and started walking towards the exit. Follow me, we need to test this out somewhere with more people. Test what out? How a maid goes unnoticed. A quick walk later, the pair were standing in the busy market district. Guild halls, large shops, and provincial offices lined the street. Olivia strode through rapidly, peeking through windows and then moving to the next building. Fayette followed along, confused about what was going on. What exactly are you looking for? A place with many people, but few servants. The larger that gap, the better. Fayette didn't quite get what the idea was, but still followed along. Eventually, the doctor stopped in front of a guild hall, a guild for spice merchants. She gestured Fayette next to her and pointed at the door. All right, this place seems like a good target for testing. I want you to go inside, and just start cleaning. Fayette nodded slowly. Just clean, all right. I can do that. What for? Just do it and try to walk through that door there. Olivia pointed at a door through the window, and try to circle around, coming out that door there. She pointed at another door, on the opposite side of the room. Fayette felt a bit leery of just walking into a place and acting as if she belonged there, but she was not one to ever back down from any cleaning work. She nodded, gripped her broom, then walked through the door. A bell rang by the door to announce her coming, and a few clerks looked her way. Fayette moved into the room, took one look at the state of things, and started cleaning. The place really did need it. Bits of dirt had been tracked inside on dirty shoes, leaving the wooden floor a right mess. Fayette's broom made quick work of that issue. Nobody took issue with her presence. The few workers who had noticed her coming had looked away as soon as she started cleaning. Nobody stopped her, so Fayette kept at it. She swept all the loose dirt into a neat pile, then whisked it off outside through the door. She then slowly, naturally, walked through the door that Olivia had indicated. It led to a meeting room, with a meeting in progress. Fayette almost winced when eyes turned to her, but they turned away as fast as they had come. Again, nobody opposed her entry, so she walked inside and started sweeping this room too. Fayette was starting to understand. Is this really working? I guess most people really don't take notice of a servant doing their duty, they just fade into the background of a scene, unnoticed. It was similar at the Hunters Guild now that I think about it. That maid cleaning there, nobody took a second look at her. A proper maid is someone who does what's needed to be done, without anyone realizing she's done it after all. Now more confident, Fayette increased her pace. She no longer hesitated, and truly let herself fall into her cleaning work. She barely noticed finishing the meeting room, and naturally moved to the next one, a hallway lined with marble statues. She took out her feather duster for those and made sure they were as good as new. With them done, she took care of the floor, and then moved along. The next door led back to the main room, and Fayette ended up sweeping the place again as more dirt had already gotten tracked in. She finished, walked outside, and gave the waiting doctor a confident smile. That's how a maid sneaks. Well done being a discreet maid, that's the sign of a pro. Level up, you have reached maid level 13. Congratulations! Progress towards next level, 0%. 1. Skill point gained. You have gained a new skill, unseen attendant. Fayette's smile grew wider. Oh, how convenient. It was time to begin the operation. Chapter 32 Operation Start. Later in the day, it was finally time to go. After succeeding at the level up, Fayette and Olivia had spent the rest of their remaining time concocting alchemical mixtures, mixtures with oomph for themselves, and mixtures with flair for Mireille, who would be on distraction duty. Mireille had been making her own preparations during the day, gathering up various things necessary for their plan. The sun had set long since, but the smog still clung to the ground as they met up at a street corner near their target factory. The three were all wearing cloth masks over their faces which helped against it, at least a bit. The masks fit the other two rather well. Olivia and Mireille had chosen similar outfits. Loose, all black garments that hid the form, a good match for the masks. Like thieves straight out of a story. Fayette looked a bit more out of place. A pristine maid outfit, fully decked out with a white apron, white cuffs and a white collar. It didn't really match the mask. She tugged at the thing with annoyance. It didn't feel good to be ruining her coordinated outfit like this. Why am I even wearing this stupid mask? We all agreed that I wouldn't be sneaking in with you two. My style is going to be more forward. Ah, well, that's true. Mireille admitted. It's just that I didn't know that beforehand, so I got 3 masks for us. Feel free to toss yours. Wait, you made these yourself? Oh, I won't toss it then. I'll find a use for it later. Are you sure you don't want any disguise at all? Just going in your normal outfit feels risky. Fayette flashed a smug smile and began digging through her pockets. Oh, don't worry about that. I actually came up with a countermeasure of my own. Just a second. She found her target, and pulled her arm out of the pocket, holding a pair of glasses. She carefully placed them on her face. There we go. This should work as a disguise, right? Mireille frowned. Well, maybe. I guess people would remember you as a maid with glasses, but isn't that a bit too obvious of a disguise? Those don't even have any lenses on them. Well, I couldn't find any better on this short notice, okay? Besides, lenses would just mess with my sight, right? Can we get to business? Olivia said, eyes seeming to sink further inside her head with every inane word said. She had been with Fayette most the day, and Fayette had noted with concern that her alcohol intake had not stopped at any point. The gloomy woman had been drinking all the way until the operation. Fayette had made a few inquiries about whether she was truly fine, but the doctor had assured that she knew what she was doing. Fayette would have believed it too, if not for the slight sway her steps held now. Yes, let's get to business. Mireille readily agreed, holding out a large bag. I made this for the last part of our plan. I'm relatively sure it will work. Fayette took it, then handed the woman a bag of her own. It was full of bottles, which clinked against each other. All right, these are the mixtures you'll need for the distraction. Should make a lot of smoke. Mireille nodded, then carefully accepted the items, making sure to keep her hands steady. She looked them over quickly, then nodded. All right, that should be everything. Are you two ready to go? Been ready since yesterday. The doctor said. I've been ready since, well, right now I guess. The maid said. Mireille nodded. Let's head in then. We'll wait for you to distract the guard, Fayette. Anything goes wrong, run away and get back to that warehouse we gathered in. Fayette nodded, then started walking directly to the front gate of the compound. Mireille and Olivia headed to the fence nearby. Their approach would be less direct. A lone guard was posted by the entrance, lazily leaning on his spear. Fayette felt a bit nervous at approaching him, but resolved herself. She was doing a maid's duty today, a good act for the people. She would not fail. She got closer to the guard, started sweeping away with her broom and activated unseen attendant, hoping the guard would take no notice of her passing. It failed. The guard's eyes had begun to glaze over her, but approaching the gate seemed to be too direct. His eyes snapped back to Fayette. She cursed silently. Hell! I guess it really doesn't quite work if I'm not doing natural made stuff. Or I need more skill points in it. Well, we still have plan B. Fayette stopped cleaning, dug out a paper slip from her pocket and showed it to the guard as she got to the gate. Hello, I was sent for some cleaning work. Late night order. The guard looked over the slip, then nodded. All right, head on in. Fayette nodded and walked past. Yes, in a rather rare turn, Plan B was not in fact the hit them with a broom plan that had been Plan C. Well, I guess I don't always have to face things broom first. Convenient that the doctor had a skill for this. Fayette had been a bit surprised by Olivia whipping out a forged documentation skill, a skill that really made her doubt the woman's doctor qualifications. Well, it did help us out. Maybe she has a good reason to have such a skill? She walked further into the courtyard, and reunited with the other two, who were already waiting there. They had slipped over the fence while she was interacting with the guard. Mireille was glaring at the doctor, who had taken out her flask for yet another drink. Fayette started to get worried for the operation. Hello again. I got through, the card worked. I said it would, slurred the doctor. That it did, Mireille said, sighing deeply. She looked over at Olivia, shook her head, and spoke again. I guess we're now doing this. I'll head out to the administrative sector, you two keep out of trouble. If I don't hear an explosion in say half an hour, I'll leave, and come look for you. Fayette nodded. If we don't see smoke after the explosion, we'll come look for you. You stay careful too, all right? You're the one going solo here. I'm the best out of us for heading out alone, don't worry yourself. Mireille seemed sure of her chances, but Fayette knew she wasn't keen on showing any weakness. Especially when important matters were at stake. She stepped closer and smoothed out the seamstress's hair. The mask seemed to have gotten it all messed up again. Just be careful. You are new to this as well after all. Can you two stop the farewells? Olivia said, finally putting her flask away. We've got to get going, and time increases risk. They may have noticed us already, and sent word to fetch an elite capture squad. That type would annihilate us, and we could be behind bars getting our nails pulled off one by one within an hour. Two silent gazes turned to her, just a bit horrified. The doctor shrugged her shoulders. Hey, it's just a possibility, all right? I didn't say it's actually going to happen. That wasn't even the worst possibility. Mireille looked at her for a moment, then sighed, stepping away from Fayette. All right, let's get to business. See you later. She waved a quick goodbye, and slinked off into the night, form blending into the shadows. Fayette took a look at her partner for this mission, a doctor who seemed to be having trouble staying on her feet. She did not feel that reassured. I guess we'll head out too. She finally said and started walking to the main factory halls. Olivia silently followed her. The building they approached was a looming giant of red brick, with an array of tall chimneys breaking up the blocky shape. No new smog was being pushed out at this hour, but enough had been made during the day. The environment was still clouded by a black haze. The pair got closer, and soon saw their first roadblock, a large door. A large, locked door. Fayette looked at the iron padlock hanging from it with disappointment. As a non-official night cleaning crew, they sadly lacked the actual keys to the place. Do you think we could convince a guard to let me in? Fayette asked. I don't know, maybe. Olivia answered. To be honest, I don't want them having too many eyes on us. Harder to take them out with surprise then. I say we just nab a key from a lone guard. What, are we taking one out already? Won't that make lots of noise? Not with my methods. This should work. Come, I think I see the light of a guard post over there. Fayette was leery of whatever this woman was planning, and only got leerier once she followed. A lone guard was walking the grounds with a lantern in hand, lazily looking over the premises. The doctor looked at the man thoughtfully, then turned to Fayette. I think your new skill could help here. Use your skill, approach, then once I'm in position, release it. That's when I'll strike. Fayette nodded slowly. It seemed the woman had a plan, so she would trust it. She took out her broom, started sweeping the ground, walked out to the open, and activated Unseen Attendant. Unseen Attendant, a proper maid, goes unnoticed at work, a natural thing with this handy skill. Non-worker classes will have a hard time noticing you while you are attending to your maid duties. Clean inconspicuously. The guard took no notice of her as she swept away at the ground and walked closer. Fayette saw Olivia activating an ability of her own, one that made her seemingly blend into the shadows. It almost reassured her, but the sway she detected in the motion of the shadow did unsettle her for a bit. Well, if she fails, I guess Plan C always exists. Fayette almost lost the last bits of trust she had when she saw what the doctor did next. She took out her flask, and took a long, deep swig from it. Is she insane? She's almost to the guard. Olivia, however, didn't act like she had done anything unusual, and just gestured for Fayette to make her move. The maid sighed silently. Well, I guess here goes nothing. She had gotten close enough, almost 2 broom measures away, and deactivated Unseen Attendant. The guard jumped, noticed her at once. His eyes widened, and his spear shifted towards her, but then the doctor jumped forward. The gloomy woman moved with grace, slipping behind the man, touching the back of his head. Fayette could just barely make out the words she said. Transfer condition. Instantly, the guard swayed on his feet, then collapsed on the ground. The doctor meanwhile lost the sway to her step and the flush that had begun creeping to her face, seeming to sober up completely. Fayette warily walked closer, and saw that the guard was already snoring on the ground. Olivia was busy digging through his pockets with one hand, while the other was holding her head. Ugh, this guy was already nursing a hangover. Fucking great. Now I don't get to be buzzed, and have to deal with this. She finally found a keychain in the man's pockets and took them out. All right, found it. Fayette only had one thought, just what kind of doctor is she supposed to be? And how much had she really drunk? Chapter 33, Sneaking In. Fayette slowly backed away from the doctor and held up her broom between them. You're not using that ability on me. I won't get mixed up with any of that. Olivia didn't look at her, instead continuing to search through the guard's belongings for anything else of interest. Relax, it will be a good while before I can use that one again. She said. Wait, does she mean she would use it if she could? Only relaxing slightly, Fayette lowered her broom a bit. She would have to discreetly inquire just how long that good while would be, but for now she should be safe. Though, this really did not seem like doctor behavior to Fayette. Are you really a doctor? This time the woman turned to look at her, thunder gathering on her face. Really a doctor? Of course I am, I've got my license. I've done my apprenticeship. But you also had that falsify documents skill. Fayette held her tongue. She did not need to argue with Olivia more during this mission. All right, does he have anything more? Should we move on? Olivia rose up, still cradling her head. Yet, he only really had the keys. Damn, how much did he drink yesterday? I can usually handle quite a bit. Fayette refrained from commenting and started silently leading them back towards the door. The padlock greeted them once again, but after a bit of fiddling about with keys, it was open and the factory was theirs to explore. Elise had made an effort at hammering the layout into Fayette's head, but the inside of the place still disoriented her. It was just all so big. She had seen big houses before. The manor had not spared expenses in that regard, but the enormous hall that spread out in front of her was something else entirely. It was by far the biggest room she had ever been in. The general principle for finding their target, the boiler room, was to follow the pipes that led there. The only issue was that the room was absolutely covered in pipes. They were everywhere. Fayette had trouble tracing them through the room as they went through. It all just sort of melded into one big pipe in her mind. She decided to leave navigating to Olivia, and focus on cleaning. There should guards inside the place too, so Fayette started sweeping the floors while under the effect of unseen attendant. Olivia slinked forward ahead of her, flitting from shadow to shadow while under her stealth skill. Fayette moved too, but, well, her progress was a lot slower. There was a lot to clean with all the machinery in the place after all, and if she started cleaning, she couldn't leave things half done. How much dust do the tops of these pipes gather? Has nobody wiped these? She saw the glow of a lantern near, a guard circling the premises on his night shift, but the man took no notice of her. Unseen attendant was doing its job well. She was just a part of the scenery. She started getting really into it. There was just so much to do in this big hall. A bit of dust on the pipes here, wiping off some grease stains there, clearing the dirt off the floor. It was a veritable trove of cleaning work for her. Just as she was hitting her stride, the maid felt a tap on her back. "Will you come along already?" Olivia said, voice twinged with annoyance. "You're not even going forward, you've circled back to clean the same place again twice." "I found the boiler room already, that way." She finished and pointed the way. Fayette blinked her eyes, noticing she had indeed been very thorough. "Oh, yeah, the whole point was to discreetly move in that direction. This skill is more difficult to use than I thought. How am I supposed to only clean a bit? I'll try and start cleaning my way in that direction. Should we do something about the guard? There's only one circling around here," she whispered back. The doctor was silent for a moment, mulling over the facts. Eventually she came to a decision. "We'll have to take him out. He's too close. Our distraction wouldn't work. No way they would confuse the smoke source." Fayette nodded, and started cleaning her way to the more open pathways, away from the forest of machinery and pipes. It rankled her a bit, leaving the big room only 1/3 finished, but she could take others into account too. Sometimes. Especially if that someone was Mireille. Hopefully she's doing fine over on her part. I really shouldn't keep her waiting, this whole thing hinges on us as much as her. Can't have one group lounging about. She was starting to get close to the guard by now and could make out a tired-looking man carrying a spear in one hand and a lantern in the other. He didn't seem to be paying much attention to his surroundings and didn't even look in her direction. I wonder if I could take him out on my own? Though, what exactly did taking out mean here? The guard didn't feel to Fayette like her other targets had. He wasn't really an obstruction to things working, just a man doing his normal job. The issue here was what he was guarding, not the man himself. What did that mean? So, someone has received orders to do something bad, but they themselves do not know it. What exactly should I do about them? Wish he was a kobold or rat or something. Why can't I just whack that lord? Would be so much simpler. A sudden moral quandary was really not what Fayette needed right now, so she decided to just ignore it and think things through later. For now, she would get rid of him whatever that entailed. There were no guarantees in combat after all. I'll just do my best. Whatever will be, will be. She was quite close to the man by now, and he still hadn't taken any notice of her. Was this another invitation? She would take it. She slowly moved onward, careful to keep sweeping up the dust. Just a few feet away from him, she suddenly stopped, and thrust her broom forward at the guard, aiming right at his head. For a moment, Fayette thought she would get him, but suddenly the man perked up, falling into a proper stance. His face showed some surprise, but that didn't slow his reaction, and his spear came to block the broom in a practiced, instinctual motion. Her broom was swatted away, and Fayette took a step back, frowning. Damn, guess this isn't going to be quite that easy. The guard also took a step back, keeping his spear pointed at Fayette. His face no longer looked distracted, only focused. What do you think you're doing here, girl? A broom? Really? He warily looked around, then started advancing, slowly walking forward, bringing his spear tip ever closer to the maid. Lay down that thing. Don't think of trying anything foolish. Fayette started backing away too, though not because she feared the spear. The man's words hadn't pleased her. Want to make fun of my broom, hey? I'll show you. She kept backing up, all the way to the point where she had stopped cleaning. The point where her big pile of dust was lying in wait. She took one more step back, then thrust her broom behind, activating sweep dust at the same time. Like a painter using their brush, she swept her broom back around and sent the cloud of dust at the man. He pulled back. Iron wall. A grey barrier appeared at his front, and blocked the cloud of dust completely. It faded away after a second, revealing an unharmed guard, spear ready for a thrust. He advanced, thrusting forward. Fayette silently cursed to herself. Fighting a proper fighter one-on-one seemed to be a bit harder than she had hoped. Luckily, she was actually not fighting one-on-one. Olivia finally chose to make her appearance. The doctor was suddenly there right behind the guard. Fayette was shocked too, she had also forgotten her backup. The gloomy doctor had a surgical knife in hand and struck it at the man's back. Blood started pouring out in a steady stream, and the doctor stepped back before the guard could react. Fayette recognized the skill. Bloodletting. So it's useful for something like this too? The guard didn't yell out or panic, he simply turned and backed away to the wall, so that nobody could get at his back again. That, however, lost him the initiative. He tried to reach around with his left, an attempt to try to plug the leak, but it didn't work. The blood flow didn't stop. Fayette heard him mutter a quiet curse. I give him a minute before he's out, Olivia said, joining Fayette's side. She looked at ease, as if a spear wasn't pointed her way just a few paces away. Fayette was warier, still keeping her broom pointed at the man. You took your sweet time, she said, a bit irritated at the woman. Needed to have him distracted, and having just used a skill, ideally. Olivia responded. The guard seemed to realize that the blood flow wasn't stopping, and made a decision. He suddenly sprang forward, abandoned his defense. You bastards, I'll take you with me, he shouted as he rushed forward, aiming to skewer Olivia. The doctor instantly backed away to the side, leaving Fayette in his path. The maid didn't have another pile of dust at the ready, but she had other ways. The guard didn't seem too poised anymore. Bleeding and panicked. Don't think you can manage another block like that. She used spicy cooking, conjuring up some spice in her right hand. She kept the hand closed and on her broom, not revealing her ploy. The guard got closer. Once the man was almost at her, she sprang back, and threw the spice right at his face. This time, he had no shield skill. The spices landed true, and the man lost his vision, yelling out in frustration. A blinded, bleeding and frustrated opponent? This was something Fayette had more experience and confidence with. She sidestepped the charge, stayed in brooming range, and swung her broom at the man's helmeted head. It rang like a bell, and he fell down, needing no more. This time, Fayette stayed her hand. She didn't think the man would be getting back up any time soon, especially judging by the bloody trail he had left behind. He wasn't bleeding anymore. Tough Olivia seemed to have stopped the skill. The doctor reappeared next to Fayette, stepping out of the shadows once more, and inspected the man. Fayette felt a bit frustrated that the woman had run off again, leaving her to deal with the man, but she stayed her tongue. Now was the time for work. She looked at the man, and noted he was still breathing. Is he going to be all right? She asked the doctor. Olivia shrugged. Maybe? Probably? I don't know. No time to check. Fayette wasn't sure whether that was really an attitude befitting a doctor, but she didn't really care that much. Well, whatever. Onwards it is. I wonder how Mireille is handling her end. Chapter 34 Mireille's Distraction. A while earlier, after the group had separated into two, near the administrative building of the factory, a seamstress was looking at the place from outside, debating how she should head in. The sloshing bottles she was carrying unnerved her a bit, but she trusted Fayette enough. They shouldn't explode on her without warning. Hopefully. She was feeling a bit nervous. Sure, she had talked big game earlier and reassured Fayette that she could handle things on her own, but she was still very new to all this. Going from orphanage girl to would-be industrial saboteur in a matter of days was quite the career change. Not the career change she had been hoping for, really. Hunter? All right, maybe, there could be a career in that. The pay was decent, the rules lax, and schedules free. One had to have some initiative, but Mireille had never lacked for that. This, on the other hand? She wasn't being paid at all. It was practically philanthropy, something that was generally the purview of the wealthy. Why did I let myself get talked into this? Oh well, I guess I couldn't have released Faye to wreak havoc on her own. At least I managed to get the pay for the rat job. While Fayette and Olivia had been busy with their own tasks, Mireille had spent the time negotiating payment for all the rat corpses, with an added hefty bonus for the danger factor. Still, that bounty wasn't really for monster rat things. Only double the pay hardly feels sufficient. I really should have negotiated harder. Gah, I need to focus. She was walking the outside of the building, peering inside windows set between brick. Finding a proper entry point took some time and some circling, but soon she found a target. A window with a latch, above which was a narrow ventilation hole. Much too narrow for even a hand to fit through, but a seamstress had her ways. Mireille focused herself and prepared to act. I better get some good experience for this one. She took out her thread and needle and sent them through the ventilation hole with needle control. She had originally put a whole lot of points in the skill as a childish whim. It had felt the most magical out of all her skills at that time. A 15-year-old was liable to partake in some matters like that. She no longer regretted the childish fancy, for the ability was proving very handy in her current line of work. She carefully watched as the needle passed through to the other side, then guided it towards the window's latch. The next bit would take some fine control, but she was practiced at this. She wound the thread around the latch for a few loops, then tied it off with a simple knot. She tugged at it to make sure it was secure, then pulled at the line. The latch was pulled up, and the window opened. Mireille let herself feel some pride. It was one thing to plan something, another to actually pull it off. Nice, I had hoped it would work this well. She carefully lowered her bags through, making sure to not knock the bottles around too much, then followed. It was a dark room full of chairs and tables, many still holding important-looking paperwork. Mireille looked around, searching for the most important-looking door. A proper distraction needed impact, a factor which generally depended on two things: how valuable the thing under threat was, and how important the person it belonged to was. Ideally, I want to find, like, the owner's room. I bet it's high up. If I was big and important and rich, I would definitely want to look down on the people under me. There was one promising candidate: a stairwell. Her instincts told her to go up, so up she would go. First, she would however take a moment to look through this room. Unattended paperwork could hold surprisingly juicy tidbits. She took off her shoes, as she didn't want to be clacking about on flooring like this. Silence was paramount. Her soft steps made no sound as she padded on the mats, making her way through the room. She gave up on trying to decipher the paperwork after the first few files she perused. Efficiency throughput flowcharts? SWOT analysis diagrams? What is all this nonsense? I'm not educated for this. She changed her tactic and started scanning for monetary symbols. Ideally she would find some financial spreadsheets. Stealing some of those would really make this look like a case of industrial sabotage. She didn't have much luck finding any though. This seemed to be the wrong office for that type of stuff. I guess I do have to head upstairs. Bet they don't let the lowly grunts get their hands on anything too compromising. Just in case, she snatched the most important looking papers she could find before heading forward. She walked over to the stairwell and started climbing the stairs. She took care to step carefully. Stories always ended with the sneak getting caught by a creaky plank. Atop the stairs, she met her first true obstacle people. Well, a person. She carefully peeked around a bend in the stairs, and saw that a man was posted up top, leaning against large curtains, nodding off, but still awake. Miri backed off downwards until she was sure there was no possibility of him noticing her. All right. How do I want to handle this? Someone guarding the way should mean that the way is important somehow. Heading through seems the best option if I want the most impact. However, removing the guard might be difficult. Miri had acquired a new skill recently, durable threads, which should help. It was still risky though. There was no telling what abilities others possessed, nor how they would be able to react to her. She needed to take the man out, without him having any chance for a counterattack. Difficult. She ran the scene through her mind. I think I can reach him with my abilities from behind the corner, but he would notice anything too direct. I need to tie him down somehow. Alter garments to restrain him, and threads around him to make sure he can't move? Too slow. How would I get them on him in time? My threads don't work that fast, and quick stitch only has a limited range. Then, an audacious idea came to her mind. The curtain the man was leaning against. It was big, seemed sturdy, and was attached to the wall above through many links. It was also made of fabric. Could she attach him to it somehow? What exactly counts as clothing? Could I use alter garments on it? That would make things easier. She had seen Fayette's creative interpretations of cleaning. What was stopping her from doing the same? She tried to imagine it. Can I really count curtains as clothing somehow? I could certainly make clothing out of a curtain, but alter garments only works on actual ready, wearable clothing. How could I see this? Could you wear a curtain as like a robe? She tried to run her mind through different options but came out empty. She just couldn't picture herself wearing a curtain as some sort of crude toga. I have to think like Fayette would, simpler, more direct, often more effective. What could I? Then the answer hit her. A cape. That's it. A curtain could totally be just a really big cape, one that is just being hung up on the wall for some reason. Yes. This should work. Her answer found, she snuck back to the bend in the stairs, made sure the man was still leaning against the curtain, then sent out a needle and thread. They snaked along the wood flooring, barely fitting into the crevices between the boards, just out of sight. It was at the edge of her range, but she could just barely make it. Good, no need to put extra skill points into that for the range. She felt her needle connect to the curtains. She focused her mind on imagining the curtain as a cape, and felt her ability work. Take measurements, alter garments. She got a picture of the curtains, and how the man leaning against them pushed against the fabric. She began to mold it, shaping it to fit against his back, careful to keep him from noticing. Soon there was a man-shaped depression in the curtains. With the curtain in place, she started stitching it to his clothes, attaching them together. She only made quick, rushed stitches, and then started using men to meld the fabrics together, truly making them one. It was quick work, taking only another minute. The man was now firmly attached to the curtain, like a fly caught in a web. None the wiser of it too, his nodding head had not moved one bit. Now she only had to finish the job. She started walking up the stairs, poised to rush out as soon as she was noticed. She held her breath with each step, hoping things would be easy, that she would not be noted at all. It took until the last stair. The treacherous step creaked at her passing, finally alerting the man. His head bobbed up, turned to her and his eyes widened in alarm. It's always a creaky step, isn't it? Mireille rushed forward. The man tried to move his right arm down to his sheath to draw his weapon, but found it stuck. The arm wouldn't budge, the clothes were sewn onto the curtain too firmly. He opened his mouth, and only the beginning of a shout got out before Mireille reached him, and sent out her needle at his face. Quick stitch! His lips were sealed, sewed closed, and the shout stopped before it could begin. Judging by his expression though, he would have liked to shout a lot more, least of all from the pain. Mireille saw his muscles bulge out, some sort of strength ability, and moved to restrain him further. Threads enhanced by durable threads were wound around him, restraining movements. His garments were shrunk and melded together, stopping the last of his squirming. Mireille looked at her work, satisfied. Sorry about that. The man did not answer. Good job with the innovative clothing. Keep it up. Progress towards next level, 45%. Looks like getting inventive is appreciated. I'll have to think on stuff like this more. Mireille focused back to the task at hand, finding an important looking place, and then throwing the mixtures she was carrying inside. The corridor had doors to the sides, but those were not what Mireille was drawn to. At the very end, there was an ornate door. An important and expensive looking door. She was sure that just that door cost more money than she had seen in her life. Whatever is behind there, it has to be valuable. And besides, it's not like we're getting paid for this. Might as well help myself to something proper. She walked forward, and carefully tried the handle. She didn't touch it herself, rather using her durable threads to pull at it from a distance. Never could be too careful. It didn't open, and Mireille grimaced. There was a keyhole on it, but she had hoped she would be lucky. She looked closer and peered through the keyhole, trying to think of some way to bypass it. Maybe I could stuff it really full of thread, and try to force it somehow? Could the fishing line work here? Maybe I need to take up a lock-picking skill. I do have one free slot now. Her thoughts were interrupted as she heard an explosion run through the building, shaking things about here and there. She leaned against the wall for support, but it was over fast, the shockwave passing as fast as it had come. Guess Fayette managed it. Mireille looked at the bag full of bottles by her side. Drat! I'll have to hurry. I only have a few seconds before I really need to throw these. As an experiment, she decided to try sending her needle through the keyhole, to the other side of the door. As she sent it through, she felt some sort of barrier break, and a shiver ran through her as she felt something settle on her. An ability, not one of hers. A voice droned out inside her head. Trespasser ward. Mark trespasser. There was an oppressive feeling to the ability, like an unseen eye staring at you. She could guess what it did based on what she had just heard. Okay, that can't be good. She felt the beginnings of panic start up inside her, but she squashed it down. Her friends had managed their part, she would have to manage hers. She took the first of the bottles out of the bag, threw them, and saw smoke and fire spread. Then the alarm bells started ringing. Mireille. Class, Seamstress, Tier 1. Level, 10. Skills. Needlecraft, 3/4. Quick Stitch, Rank 2. Needle Control, Rank 4. Durable Threads Rank 3. Tailoring, 3/4. Adjust Garments, Rank 3. Mend, Rank I. Take Measurements, Rank I. Capstone Skills, 0/0. N/A. Free Skills, 2/3. Basic Trap Setting, Rank I. Basic Tracking, Rank I. Free Slot. Unspent Skill Points, 1. Chapter 35. Let them drown in their own filth. A bit earlier, after Fayette and Olivia had finished dealing with their one guard, they were nearing their target. The factory lay silent around them, no more guards walking the grounds. The silence grated on Fayette. She was getting more and more curious about the doctor she was working with every moment, and after they stepped into a long corridor she could no longer hold it in. Should a doctor be doing stuff like this anyways? You really got that guy good. Isn't there like a do no harm oath or something? Olivia spared her a small glance but kept her focus forward. Humph. Maybe for those university pissants. Always so high and haughty. Doesn't stop them from focusing on greed instead of their work. Have you done stuff like this before then? The woman slumped down a bit. No. I haven't, to be honest. I wish I had. Hearing you lot plotting something like it was natural, I wanted in. I need this. Need it? What makes it so important? Olivia's sunken eyes turned to her, and she sighed. Being a proper doctor is not that pleasant, you know. It's very frustrating. Really? Isn't helping people nice? I always feel good after cleaning. Bringing things to order feels nice. Well, maybe. But for me, it's just always felt so futile. The woman looked up at the pipes running above the corridor, reminiscing. As a doctor, you are always behind the curve, reacting, desperately trying to stay the symptoms. She turned back to Fayette, and this time there was anger in her gaze. It's frustrating, you know. Treating people, trying to help them, and knowing that you can't get at the true cause, and it will bring more patients. Once, I was working at a village which had a bandit problem. There were frequent clashes, injured people coming in. Missing legs, arms, eyes. She turned back forward. I treated them, but new ones didn't stop coming in. The bandits were still out there after all. It felt futile, no matter what I did, more people would keep coming, injured. Then, some hunters came through and dealt with the bandits. It was done, the town threw a party for them. Know what happened to me? They thanked you for your services. Fayette tried. Olivia laughed, a bitter angry laugh. Ah, if only it were so. No, I failed to treat a few people. People that mattered, important ones. Folk got angry. Blamed it on me, because they didn't think I was a proper doctor. I had to run away from there. She gestured at the room around them. This? It's finally cutting directly at the source, treating the cause, not the effect. It's nice. Something I needed. Fayette nodded, mulling over the words. She understood, in a way. She had thought many similar things before. A maid's work was also about dealing with effects, and she had only recently moved to causes. Killing the rats lurking beneath the city was one thing, getting rid of their source another. But, she couldn't help feeling she was missing something. She looked at the pipes running above her, one single component of this giant factory, which was one factory in a giant city. A small speck in the grand scheme of things. Was even this enough? How much was she really doing with something like this? She shook the thoughts out of her head. She could think on it later. Now, she had a task to complete, and complete it she would. They stepped out of the corridor, finally arriving at their target, the boiler room. Huge metal tanks were lined in rows, with a locked storage container that reeked of Magi coal in one corner. Below the tanks were the furnaces, vast things below which a channel ran, a channel then ended in coppery pipe, low on the ground. No fires burned at this hour, but a black, oily sludge was still steadily dripping down from the furnaces, down into the channel where it mixed with the water flowing within, then being carried into the pipe. Fayette could smell the same acrid scent she had felt down in the Undercity. There was no doubt about it, this was the source. It felt odd. This one little pipe, in this one big room, was causing so much harm to people. In a way, it reassured Fayette. If such an insignificant thing could cause harm, why couldn't a humble maid put a stop to it as well? She looked at Olivia and nodded. This is it. It's the same smell. The doctor frowned, and went to inspect the furnaces, as well as the channel leading out of them. She took out a test tube, collected some residue into it, then sealed it. She nodded at Fayette. "All right, I've got some samples for myself. Let's see where this pipe leads." Fayette traced it through the room, and saw it lead forward, down another corridor. This one had a locked door safeguarding it. Luckily, the guard had been kind enough to provide a key. She walked to the door and tested the key on it, and it slid right in, clinking in a satisfying manner. The door swung open, and the pair headed further in. "How far in do you think we should make the breach?" Fayette asked, examining the corridor around them. Olivia hummed in thought. "I think we'll need to head out forward at least a bit more. I would like to have a more open space somewhere, where it would feel natural for something important to be. I think our decoy has the best chance working in a place like that." "Makes sense. Let's move on then, though we can't go too far. Have to stay on this side of the hill so it all runs off into the correct direction." They walked a bit further, diligently following the pipe, and the corridor opened up, widening for a bit. "Is this our spot?" Fayette asked, already lowering her bags to the ground. "I think it should work," Olivia answered. She bent down to examine the ground below the pipe and wiped off some dust. The corridor steadily descended down, and the brick flooring had been replaced with bare stone. It didn't look too tough, Fayette estimated. She pulled out a canister from her bag. "No point waiting around. Let's do it." Olivia thought for a moment, then walked back from the pipe, slowly backing away behind a bend. "All yours." Fayette smiled. She rather liked the current plan, to be honest. Blow up a little hole into the ground and pipe, cover it up, and let the factory runoff go where it really deserved to. She marked a proper spot, then placed a canister of explosive by the pipe. It wasn't that deadly of a concoction, but should work well enough to get them started here. With the explosive in place, she then took out a cloth pouch filled with reagent. She uncorked the canister, threw the cloth pouch inside, then bolted, running back behind the bend as fast as her legs took her. She made it just in time and managed to cover her ears before an explosion sounded out, filling the corridor with loose dust. Fayette coughed in the haze for a bit, then took out her broom and activated sweep dust. Nothing like a proper maid to clean up after an explosion. She swept the loose dust up, then walked back to the explosion site, collecting the dust along the way. It took her a bit of time to get it all collected into a pile and visibility restored into the passage. Olivia crept up from behind her, coming to inspect their work. The pipe had been burst open along a segment, and the runoff was gushing down from it, making the acrid stench even more prominent. It was running right into the hole they had just made into the ground. To be honest, it felt underwhelming. All this work, for the sake of one burst pipe? To be fair, their strategy was reliant on things not being too noticeable. It would take time for the runoff to really seep into the ground, and start bringing joy to those deserving. Fayette could almost imagine it. Let the nobles deal with the rats next time. Enjoy your own filth. Is it good enough? Do we have to blow the ground open more? Fayette asked, walking beside the doctor. She had a few more canisters of the explosive with her, just in case the first bunch didn't do the job. I think this should work well enough, Olivia answered, then pointed down their fresh hole. See that? It's not bare stone there, that's dirt. See how the runoff is already seeping into it? It's going right into the ground. Fayette squinted down the hole and saw it was true. The runoff wasn't pooling up, so their task should be a success. At least the first part. Next the cover-up. Mireille should be acting now. Better hurry up. Can you get the tarp out? She asked. I need to clean up the remnants of the explosion. Still a lot of traces remaining, we can't have that. The doctor nodded and started opening up the tarp Mireille had made for them. Fayette, meanwhile, got to cleaning. It was a pretty quick job: gather up the dust in the room, then wipe off any visible stains and burns with a bit of her all-purpose cleaner. Once she was finished, Olivia threw the tarp over the break in the pipe, and then they secured it over the hole together, covering up all of their work. Fayette took a step back to examine their finished work. She wasn't honestly sure whether this was a stroke of genius or complete foolishness, but it was the best ploy that Mireille could come up with. There was no visible sign of their sabotage visible, just a segment of the pipe covered by a large tarp. A tarp with "Do Not Remove. Important Maintenance" written on it. "Does this type of stuff really work?" Fayette asked. It felt too blatant. "You would be surprised," Olivia answered. "People like to have simple days at work, and follow instructions. I doubt anyone will be removing this for quite some time. I don't think anyone who would dare would even be allowed down here." Fayette nodded, still feeling nervous. She however wasn't feeling that nervous about the tarp ploy, to be honest. She trusted Mireille's judgment enough for that. What she was really nervous about was a deeper feeling within, that soundless calculation she could sense. She had not gotten an experience notification yet. She could, however, feel it. It was connected to her class, so it was like an itch just outside her reach, intensifying. It had never taken this long before. She had done all this because it felt like the right thing to do, the right thing on her Maid path. But was it really so? The message would reveal it. Not seeing it filled her with anxiety. Olivia was already jogging away, so Fayette turned to follow. They couldn't tarry. However, Fayette's mind was not with the operation at the moment. The calculation was still going on, measuring, judging, weighing. The sound of the runoff flowing through the pipe was clearer to her now. The sludge was seeping down into the ground, away from the undeserving district of before. A proper household took care of their own filth. No proper maid should accept irresponsible waste dumping, Fayette was sure of that. She clamped down on her nervousness. "I am not wrong. This is the correct thing to do, and even if the system disagrees, I won't put that trash where it really belongs. Darn, that's going to end up being a lot, won't it? Level up, you have reached Maid level 15. Congratulations. 2 skill points gained. Progress towards next level, 10%. Fayette stumbled on her feet. 2 whole levels? It had really liked that. L level 15? But doesn't that mean Tier 2 class upgrade unlocked, 5 different options available. Chapter 36 Maid class up. Fayette almost completely lost her balance when she saw her class options. Out of her 5 options, she sensed only one common one, leaving the rest as uncommon. Alright, she had been fairly certain that she would receive an uncommon option, but 4? That was more than she had dared hope. She decided to look over the common one first, just so she could gloat her superiority over it. Maid Adept, after gaining proficiency in the basics of your craft, you are ready to tackle greater responsibilities. A natural next step for all maids, one can always count on a Maid Adept to handle the housekeeping and attend to their master. Expand attendant and housekeeping domains. This is indeed the common one. I think most of the maids back at the manor took this one. Had I continued there as one among them, that might have been me. Ha! Take that, Clara. Bet you didn't get 4 uncommon options. Oh, right, she died. Shouldn't gloat over the dead. Bad luck, I think. Hey! What are you blanking out for? We need to move. Fayette raised her head to meet an annoyed Olivia. Right, there was a bit of a situation going on. Mireille might be in trouble. Need to hurry. Sorry, she answered, then continued moving along the corridor. Class upgrade. Nice options. Look over them as you move, you might need one soon. I think I can hear alarm bells, it's too fast. Fayette nodded, quickened her pace to a brisk jog, then moved to the next class option. Perfectionist Maid, after taking extra care to handle all tasks thoroughly with a perfectionist's eye, you will be ready to take perfection to greater heights. A class for maids not satisfied with handling tasks just well enough. A perfectionist maid will ensure her work is thorough. Unlock Pursuit of Perfection domain. She knew she wouldn't pick it, but seeing the option did fill her with happiness regardless. Her method of work at the manor had not been for naught. She had been on the correct track for something better. An option she would have been happy to choose in a more peaceful future. Sadly, I don't think it'll help me out much in these circumstances. Maybe it could have combat applications? I could notice errors enemies are making or something like that. Feels like a long shot. I guess if the other options don't work, I can return to this. She shelved the option right as she burst out of the corridor, back into the main boiler room. The noise of the alarm bells was louder now. She shut and locked the door behind her and continued on. The next class made her raise an eyebrow. Treacherous maid, you've used the innocent guise of a maid to take your unaware master down. Tired of working for some lousy boss who could really use a dagger between the ribs? Thrilled at the thought of slipping into a retinue unaware of your true nature, then taking them apart? If so, this is the class for you. Unlock Treachery domain. Hey! Who are you calling treacherous? I'm a very trustworthy person. Alright, my one and only boss may have ended up with a case of melted face, but you can't draw conclusions from such a small selection. Besides, it doesn't count as treachery or betrayal if they deserved it, right? Although she felt an instinctual dislike for the class, she forced herself to consider it further. It hinted at subterfuge, deception, and assassination, which might prove useful fields. For example, having the class might have made her current mission a lot easier. Sneaking into places and sabotaging them seemed to fit the option's purview very well indeed. Still, that wasn't really the type of person Fayette wanted to be. She liked more direct approaches, ones which had her facing enemies directly. She didn't really want stealth to be her main thing. Besides, the class just reeked of trouble. It was just the sort that the church preached against, whisperings of the devil. It did seem suspect, not a class for a virtuous person. Getting inspected with that class would be sure to lead to trouble. Fayette quickly traced a box over her heart, just so the saints above would know she wasn't really considering this one. Hey, I'm not falling to temptation, all right? I'm pious and proper. No sins here. She got to the main factory halls, and on to the next class option. Made of cleansing flames, you've realized that some things can only be truly cleaned through the power of fire. Does the world seem too dirty and debased, in need of a proper cleansing? Do you feel the urge to just torch it all down? Expand your embers to a roaring inferno with this class. Unlock Cleansing Flames domain. Fayette had to pause for a good moment to consider this one. It felt just as sinful as the last one, maybe even more so. More worryingly, Fayette felt this one actually calling to her. Burning down that mansion had been a lot of fun, to be honest. So had rigging up the bomb here. Wait, am I actually considering this? I mean, it might actually have some decent combat options. Burning foes down into ashes should be effective, right? Could I even unlock the power to burn brick? That would have made this whole factory sabotage thing a lot easier. Besides, was this really another offering of the devil, a temptation she would have to resist? Fayette began searching through her mind. She had not actually paid that close attention to her lessons. The priests had always tended to drone on in that boring way, so she wasn't too certain whether pyromania even was a sin. Weren't fire mages virtuous heroes in the stories? Like, what if I only burned down bad people, and bad buildings? Surely that would be fine? The church wouldn't oppose, right? I might need to consult someone on this one. It was the most tempting one so far, so the choice would go to a comparison with the final. Olivia had stopped to return their key to the unconscious guard's pouch, and rejoined Fayette right as they ran out of the main factory hall, back outside. She had grabbed some papers and other materials to her pouch, things to make their deception more convincing. The hazy smog had cleared a bit, and the outside was now lit clear by moonlight. Fayette felt her heart calm when she saw a plume of smoke coming from the administrative building, just as planned. Mireille had succeeded. However, she tensed again when she noticed another plume, this one from further away. Not something they had agreed on. There's no reason she would start another unplanned fire, not unless she's in trouble. Maybe it's a signal for us? She didn't tarry and began running in that direction. Olivia took only a moment to follow. It wasn't a long distance, so Fayette looked over her last option. Combat Maid, you've found that some trash fights back against attempts to be cleaned, an issue you have found a solution for. Who says a frilly apron and sturdy broom can't efficiently dish out violence? A class for those who know better and want to take their fighting prowess to the next level. Perfect the arts of maid combat using this class. Unlock Maid Combat Domain. It felt like a good choice, a class that really described her aspirations, and seemed safe. Reliable. It didn't seem dubious like the two before, and seemed to pack enough punch to help her in this career path. No reason anyone should oppose her having this one either. If anything, it might make things easier. I bet they would even let me become a proper hunter at the guild if I picked this one. If that stupid book of theirs doesn't have a combat maid as a fighter class, I will tear it in two. Damned book. Still, it was a bit of a more boring option, more conventional. Would she be willing to give up on her dreams of fire for the sake of powering up her physical fighting? Fayette rounded a corner around the building and finally saw the source of the smoke plume. Mireille did indeed seem to be in a spot of trouble. She was standing with her back to a storage shed, a squad of guards surrounding her. The seamstress was holding a smoking bottle in her hand and waving it at her pursuers. I'm warning you. If you try something, I'll drop this and we'll all be blown to smithereens. You all heard the explosion before, that took only one of these. No rash movements. It seemed a clever bluff, but not a decisive one. Fayette knew this situation would need a direct hand. Her friend was in trouble, and force was needed. In the end, it was no choice at all. Class upgrade chosen, Combat Maid. Fayette felt her class expanding, strengthening as its potency moved up a tier. It was like an old, ill-fitting garment finally expanding to fit her grown form. You have unlocked the Maid Combat Domain. You have gained a new skill, Maid Armor. Conditions met, cleaning tool proficiency and Maid's poise can be merged into Maid Martial Arts. Fayette. Class, Combat Maid, Tier 2. Level, 15. Skills. Housekeeping, 3/4. Sweep dust, Rank 3. Cleaning tool proficiency, Rank 3. Spicy cooking Rank 2. Attendant, 4/4. Maid's poise, Rank 3. Cutlery control, Rank I. Disarming smile, Rank I. Unseen attendant, Rank I. Maid combat, 1/4. Maid armor, Rank I. Capstone skills, 0/1. N/A. Free skills, 3/3. Eavesdrop, Rank 2. Basic alchemy, cleaning agents, Rank 2. Danger sense Rank 2. Unspent skill points, 4. Chapter 37 MMA Brawl. It was a tense standoff. The brick facade guarded Mireille's back, but also blocked off any routes of escape, letting her chasers box the seamstress in. The smog still made the air a tad hazy, but not enough to markedly affect visibility. The plume of smoke let off by the bottle in Mireille's hand snaked off into the sky like a threatening viper, keeping the guards cowed. For now. Fayette knew it wouldn't last. The situation had a certain balance right now, the guards quietly and slowly advancing forward, and Mireille threatening them back. A balance the guards did not mind, and Mireille could not change. However, the balance was already broken. Reinforcements had arrived, the guards just hadn't noticed it quite yet. Once they properly took her and Olivia in, Fayette knew the guards would act. She had one option: act first. A few heads had turned her way already, but it would take a few moments for her entry to properly register. There was no time for an elegant or thought-out plan, leaving only one simple option. Break through. Well, time for something simple then. She started running forwards, dealing with her level up as she ran. Skill merges were generally a good opportunity. Merging slots left one free, while still holding the functions of both old skills. She mentally accepted the skill merge. Cleaning Tool Proficiency 3 and Maid's Poise 3 have been merged into Maid Martial Arts I. Maid Martial Arts A. Broom and skirt are no impediment to battle. Master the many techniques of MMA, and prove your superiority over foes. Lucky I had just enough skill points in them for the merge. My first uncommon skill. Her steps felt firmer, and her poise grew more ready. Her apron and skirt moved with her legs now, not impeding her steps. She adjusted her broom grip, moving to something more appropriate for a quarterstaff. Good, should make this next part easier. She drew her broom behind herself, ready for a swing. Just like the games she and Mireille had used to play, all she was missing was a ball. Mireille. Throw. By now, the guards had noticed her, but they were facing the wrong way. Mireille was not. It took the seamstress but a heartbeat to register the command, and act. She didn't hesitate, she trusted Fayette enough. She moved the smoking bottle to her right hand, readied for a proper pitch, and threw, sending the projectile flying over the guards. Fayette braced for a home run. She wasn't quite sure whether her current skill ranks would be enough for what she was attempting, so she decided to splurge a bit. Skill up. Sweep dust has reached rank 4. Might as well be thorough. Skill up. Sweep dust has reached rank 5. No offer for an upgrade to uncommon tier. Guess I'm missing a condition. Fayette didn't really mind, as more important matters were at hand. Mireille's throw finally reached her, and her broom hit the bottle, smashing it open, and smoke billowed out. Fayette activated sweep dust. Smoke is just dust in the air, right? With her added level to the skill, Fayette had felt her control grow. She adjusted her handling on the skill, holding it in a constant sweep-out mode. The smoke that had begun to gather was suddenly thrust away from the broom. The maid swept her broom out in a wide arc, and like a painter with her brush, started working on her canvas. The guards that was. The smoke went out in a wide screen, covering the formation wholesale. Coughs and curses sounded out, and visibility for those within was reduced to nil. Fayette grinned. Excellent. Part 1, the distraction, is complete. Now, for the action. She kept running forward, then checked beside her and saw that Olivia was still with her, following her closely. Fayette had just the right job in mind for her. Olivia, you watch the outside. Keep them in the smoke. Olivia nodded, took out her surgeon's knife, then slowed her run. What will you be doing? Fayette shifted her gaze back forward and continued her run straight at the cloud of smoke. Extracting Mireille. She held out her broom, and prepared for another swipe. Just as she reached the cloud of smoke, she swept from bottom to top, and sweep dust did its work. Feeling like the legendary saint, she parted the ocean, and a corridor free of smoke was swept up, revealing Mireille. And 3 guards. One was blocking off the passage, back to Fayette, while the other 2 were in the center, advancing on Mireille. All right, a simple 1 2 3. Let's go. The first guard blocking her path took a heartbeat to process the clearing of the smoke, and then began to turn towards the approaching maid, spear sweeping out towards her. Humph, too fast for a nice back brooming. Well, Fayette had options. The guard's expression bore no nervousness at facing a maid armed with a broom. A beginner's mistake. Fayette turned her broom around in her hand, pointing the blunt end at the man, as if preparing for a forward thrust. The man smirked, confident he could block. Fayette did not smirk, though for some reason she felt an urge to do so. The guard was preparing for a direct fight, but he did not take note of how the other end of Fayette's broom was subtly trailing the smoke. Here amidst the smoke, she was not just a combatant, she was a painter, and the smoke all around was her palette. Sweep dust. Instead of thrusting forward with her broom, Fayette swept it out sideways, dragging a mote of smoke right into the guard's face. His spear jerked, the prepared block skill falling to waste, and his defensive posture broke. Fayette moved closer. Unlocking Maid martial arts had taught her much, and she felt an instinctual knowledge of hand-to-hand combat. She was eager to try it out. Fayette dodged the wildly swishing spear, thrust her broom between the man's legs, and pushed his upper body forward with her full momentum. A simple lever action, and the man was sent tumbling into the smoke, with a slightly twisted leg. Fayette had not slowed one bit with the encounter, and continued onwards towards Mireille. I think I'll call that one the take out the trash. With one obstacle out the way, she got a better look at Mireille's situation. One guard was writhing in pain on the ground, while the other was advancing. Somehow, Mireille was managing to dodge and weave out of his spear's path. Despite her running start, the maid knew every moment of a prolonged fight would also prolong the risks. I need to help Mireille now, not when I finally reach her. Luckily, she had a ranged option ready at hand. Cutlery control rang out, a knife was pulled into her arm, and in one fluid motion, she flicked it at the guard. The throw flew steady and true, clanging against the man's helmet. No damage, but a distraction at least. The sound made the man twitch, and he turned his head back to find the source. Just in time for Fayette's second knife to take him in the cheek. It wasn't much in terms of stopping power or damage, but it was enough. A chance, a distraction. As the man shouted out in pain and gritted his teeth, he failed to stop the needle that flashed towards him from the other direction, burrowing into his clothes. The guard's clothes started to constrict around him, threads winding around in tightening motions, but not quite strong enough. He bent to cut at the threads, to free herself, and sliced apart the seams with his spear. Right in time for Fayette to arrive. He was already bent over, giving Fayette a nice invitation for a brooming. She was getting quite adept at the art. With her maid martial arts unlocked, her blows carried more weight with them too. She swung her broom, mimicking her earlier home run. His helmet rang out like a bell, and the man crumpled onto the ground. Fayette took a second to stop, breathe, and take in the situation. The last guard had been handled by Mireille and was not getting up. Fayette did not know quite what had been done to the man, but it did seem rather painful. She raised her gaze and met her friend's eyes. Eyes that shone with relief. Mireille raised her hand for a greeting. Fayette grabbed it, shifted around, then bolted into a run. Mireille, we need to go. With the other assailants in the smoke, we should be clear for a getaway. She pulled her friend with her, steps synchronizing, and got to the passage in the smoke. She took a breath of relief once inside it, as it took her a step closer to real escape. One of them can still. Just as Fayette began to register Mireille's words, the smoke shifted right next to her, revealing a sword headed right at her head. Wait, how can he see me? The position was awkward, and she could not bring her broom up in time. In a desperate block, she brought her arm up, bracing for the sword's blow. The sword hit her maid uniform sleeve and then glanced off, as if hitting hard armor. Fayette felt herself smile. Her new skill was better than she had expected. Maid armor. A maid's uniform is her armor. Gain defense proportional to how clean, prim, and proper your uniform is. With this skill, you are set for an elegant battle. She had been very careful throughout the engagement, taking care to not touch the smoke at all herself or get any other traces of grime on her uniform. Her uniform had not a spot of dirt on it. Well, except for a trail of smoky black the sword had left on it. Fayette could already feel her defense weakening from it. Better than I expected. Guess it's worth some investment. Skill up, Maid armor has reached rank 2. Mireille's eyes widened, and Fayette kept running, dragging the woman along. She hoped the confusion of the smoke would last for a bit longer, enough to make a clean getaway. She heard footsteps as someone stepped out of the smoke, into the passage cleared by her. The one who had just almost gotten her. She got out of the smoke, passage closing behind her, and saw that Olivia had not been idle. The doctor was standing guard outside, 2 heavily bleeding men crumpled by her feet. They were not moving at all. The doctor quirked an eye at Fayette. You really managed to get her out of that? Formidable. Fayette intended to keep running, but Mireille, at last, made her stop, tugging the maid to a standstill. Faye, we can't run quite yet. Fayette turned back, confused. What do you mean? Mireille pointed behind her, at the man who had appeared amidst the smoke. He was tall and built like a bull, heavy armor clanking with every move, and a feathery cap swishing with his head. No ordinary guard. Fayette knew only important people wore hats with as many feathers on them as this man. She felt her class instinctively bristle, some hollow, missing part reacting to the man. A noble? That guy, he's got some tracking skill on me. I've tried hiding and running, but he keeps finding me again and again. Probably how he just almost got you too. Fayette tensed. This was getting difficult again. How do we solve that? Olivia, can you do that swap thing? It doesn't work with stuff like this, and besides, it would only move the mark to me instead, the doctor said as she stepped beside them, examining the man with a surgeon's eye. There is, however, always one easy way to remove a skill. Remove the skill user. You could try to break the limit of the skill otherwise too, bet this one's distance. Fayette thought for a moment. Their party really was not built for rapid escapes, and she did not see their chance at that as good. She made her decision, nodded, and started digging through her apron of holding. She had just made a fresh batch of all-purpose cleaner for this operation, and still had a bomb left too. All right, then we face him. Surely this counts as a situation where it's all right to kill a noble? Chapter 38 No Trash Talk. It was a simple task, eliminate one enemy, and Mireille would be freed from his ability. Fayette felt annoyed, to be honest. It was like her class was itching just from the presence of a noble. Is being a maid with no master really that bad? I should hurry this up. Mireille was looking over the scene, and her eyes stopped at the warehouse wall beside them. Faye, did you have an extra explosive left over? I do, the one. Can you give it to me? You have an idea. The start of one at least. Fayette quickly dug through her apron of holding with one hand, while keeping an eye to the situation in front. Their feather-capped pursuer was not making any moves. He seemed happy to let the smoke around his allies dissipate before making any advances on them. He had all the time in the world with his ability after all. Finally, Fayette got her hands on the bottle, and handed it to Mireille. Here. The activation reagents are in the attached pouch. The seamstress took the bottled bomb, and began fiddling with it. 3 guards managed to step out of the smoke, coming to stand next to the leading one. He seemed satisfied with his group and took a step forward, sneering at Fayette and the others. What kind of sorry lot is this? A maid and a few lost girls? You are brave to waste my night with this. Fayette quirked an eyebrow at the man. I'm surprised you are resorting to trash talk, she shouted back. The man smoothed one of the feathers on his helmet as he frowned. What do you mean? Usually, trash can't talk at all. Frankly, I'm impressed with you. His face reddened, and he took a step forward, gripping his sword tighter. You. That was when Mireille threw the bottle. It smoked as it flew in a clear arc, and an explosion blasted out right in the leading guard's face, strong enough to crack a hole into the warehouse wall. The other nearby guards were lucky to be just a few steps away, and only got thrown onto their backs as shield skills activated and broke. The main target, though he just stepped out of the smoke as if nothing had happened, the feathers on his helmet not even one bit scorched. You dare? You dare lay a hand on I Florinandia, 3rd Guard Captain of Palogny, and grandson of Lord Aumont himself. Fayette felt a few jitters at how nonchalant the man was about an explosion right by his face, but kept it from showing on her face. You can't be that important if you're a 3rd Guard Captain. She shouted back. Strange, I feel like shouting snide remarks a lot more. Is this part of my maid martial arts? Why you? Fayette tuned out the rest of his yells and turned to Mireille. You saw that, right? He took it like it was nothing. Do we have a plan? I'm not sure. I can try something, but you'll have to keep him and the others occupied for a few moments. Think you can manage? Fayette took a quick look at their rapidly reddening target, then turned to Olivia. Can you keep the guards off my back for a minute? I'll try to handle him one-on-one. The doctor nodded. That blast got the lot concussed. I should manage. Be careful with the man. My diagnosis is not showing many signs of old injuries or ailments on him. He hasn't lost many fights. Fayette turned to eye him again. That just means he lacks experience. She took a step forward. Then she started running. The man finally quieted and braced for a defense, sword in hand. A foolish effort, Fayette thought. After all, who would willingly bring a sword to a broom fight? The advantage of long range was quite clear. She used spicy cooking as she ran, threw the conjured pile of red at her broomhead, and activated sweep dust at the same time. It was time to give her spice whirl mix another try. A vortex formed, and Fayette shifted her broom so it touched the ground, allowing her to gather more and more dust as she approached her target. 2 more guards stepped free of the smoke, still disoriented by the blast. Fayette didn't look at them, or check her sides to see that her companions were following. She trusted Olivia and Mireille enough. Instead, she kept her eyes steadily on her own target, who she decided to name Featherhat for the sake of brevity. Featherhat did not seem nervous, the only emotion he betrayed was scorn, the expression of someone looking at his inherent lessors. Fayette felt just a bit offended, to be honest. As she got closer, she got a closer look at him. The man had a scraggly, unkempt beard, and a uniform stained by spilled ale. His black trousers may have fooled the less keen of eye, but as an experienced maid, she could see the signs of how long it had gone unwashed. Was he drinking somewhere, and our stunt interrupted his night? Such a man could look at her with scorn, could claim birthright for status, and live a life of debauchery off it? Fayette could not let him win, her pride as a maid alone demanded she beat him down. She got close, and flung her spice dust vortex at him, hoping to wipe the sneer of his face. He stepped right through the attack, as if it couldn't touch him one bit. Fayette followed up with a strike at his face, but the man stepped through that too, broom passing through him as if he were a ghost, and raised his sword for a thrust. What kind of ability is this supposed to be? Having stepped through her broom, Featherhat's sword was very close to Fayette's face, but she managed to twist her broom up into a block. The sword, however, just phased right through it again, continuing at the arm that was now in the way. How am I supposed to fight this? Fayette let it hit her arm, and felt a sting as the blow struck her. Her maid armor held, just barely, and she didn't take a cut. The impact was painful enough on its own. Her sleeve frayed, weakening her defense further, but she managed to hold on to her broom. She removed her left hand from the broom, used cutlery control to call a knife into it, and stabbed it at her foe's face. If he decided to get this close to her, she would take the opportunity. The knife neared his face, but then he just stepped right through Fayette altogether. It felt very uncomfortable. Before, the distances had been smaller, so she hadn't really gotten a proper good look at the process, but now she was certain. Movement was the key somehow. He had never just sat still to take a hit, and always moved forward when the blow came. Was it a movement skill then? Not a fast one certainly. It took him a full second to pass through Fayette and emerge on her other side, enough time for Fayette to turn around. He was stepping forward again, this time swinging his sword towards Mireille, who had been right behind Fayette. "Oh no, you don't!" He had given Fayette enough time to turn around, and with Fayette came her broom. She hit him on the back, and this time there was no phasing through it. She struck true, and his armor clanged. He shuddered forward for a second, his sword blow went off course, and Mireille managed to dive past him, and get through the cracked wall to inside the warehouse. That was what she was after. Featherhat spun around, but Fayette moved over to block the passage into the warehouse. "Hey! I'm your opponent here," he snorted. "You think your skills can block my relentless pursuit? Fool!" Fayette's eyes widened. Did this guy just tell me his ability's name? How dumb is he? Fayette swatted her broom at him in a low blow, careful to keep out of his range, but he didn't advance this time, and only seemed to be playing for time waiting. Waiting for what? Fayette took a quick glance to the side, and saw that while Olivia had managed to get a few guards to the ground, many more were still on their feet and advancing on her. She would be overwhelmed soon. Featherhat noticed Fayette's glance and grinned. "Getting worried, are you? Throw down your arms and I may let you live." Fayette forced all her growing panic down, and crushed it down into resolve. She could not lose faith now. She felt tempted to run her mouth, but kept quiet. No need to ruin a good surprise. If the man failed to see the significance of letting Mireille inside the warehouse, that was fine with her. Warehouses in textile mills tended to store one type of thing, and a certain seamstress had recently received enlightenment on the topic of capes. A cape just like that one that suddenly flew out of the hole, right at the guard captain's face. He activated his ability and stepped through it, of course, but it was the thought that counted. "Mireille, that won't do any good against him, go help Olivia." "I've got this." "You sure?" "All right." Mireille crawled back out the hole, this time carrying a veritable trove of different cloths. She took one look at the scene outside, then ran to help Olivia, another piece of cloth flying out to tie down guards. Fayette let a bit of smirk show on her face, just enough to rile up her opponent even more. His face was dark, and Fayette could already see him preparing his ability for a dash forward. Fayette obliged, and thrust forward with an easily predictable broom hit. He began phasing through it, appeared on Fayette's other side, then began dashing for Mireille at full speed. A bit too fast for Fayette to catch up, which was why she had already gotten out a bottleful of her all-purpose cleaner. She threw the small bottle at him, praying that her deduction was right. He's already moving towards Mireille, his target. If I oppose his pursuit, he can phase through. What about if I help him along? He didn't phase through this time either. The bottle struck true, hit him on the head, burst open, and the all-purpose cleaner was sent spraying out, a good bit dripping on his exposed nape. It began sizzling, and he screamed, stopping his mad dash. Fayette went for the chase, already gathering a new vortex of spice and dust on her broom. Sadly, he only slowed a bit. He had already gotten some bottle of his own out, and he threw a dash of the red liquid on his nape, healing the injuries. Fayette cursed. Potions, of course. Damned rich folk. He took a look behind him, frowned at Fayette's approach, and began circling to the side. Is he trying to put Mireille behind me again? No, not a chance at that. Mireille, stay behind this guy. We need to keep him between us. The seamstress was rather busy tying up guards with a fluttering of capes, but did manage to move in the direction Fayette indicated. Enough targets in that direction too. A flash of indecision went through Featherhat's face, as he looked between the seamstress who was rapidly tying down his guards and the maid who was approaching him. He gritted his teeth, then turned fully to Fayette. Fayette felt a barrier break with her next step, and a force set over her. Trespasser ward. Mark trespasser. Oh? He's abandoning Mireille and targeting me now? Fine with me. Fayette held her broom low, kept running at him, and kept expanding her spice dust vortex. Featherhat took up his sword for a guard pose, and readied himself. Fayette got close, thrust the vortex at him, and he began phasing through it. Then Fayette pulled the vortex back to right in front of her, and held it in place. Previously, she had thrown it, letting Featherhat pass right through, but now she made a gamble. The spice and dust was striking her too, and her maid armor disappeared in an instant, as the grime took to her apron. "What's your play now then? Can't exactly pass through this if you aim to pursue me." His play turned out to be, well, nothing. He materialized back fully, right in the middle of the vortex, and struck his sword forward. The sword grazed Fayette's thigh, cutting through cloth to draw a deep line of blood. Fayette winced at the pain, but then Featherhat started to scream. His nape had been healing from the all-purpose cleaner, but blisters still remained, which made the spice getting into them hurt quite a bit. Well, so did the eyes, nose, and other spots too. He was stuck there now, right in the center of the dust and spice as it roiled and raged against his skin. Fayette smiled, then threw a fork at his eye. He roared out in pain, and collapsed to his knees, bringing up his hands to shield his face. His sword clattered down to the ground. Him kneeling had brought his face temptingly low, and it had been some time since Fayette had felt Nobleface on her boots. She held the broom and vortex in place, braced her bleeding thigh, loaded up a kick with her right foot, and smashed it right at his head. He collapsed down. Fayette moved the broom down, letting the spices grind against his exposed skin, then kept stomping on his head, heedless of the sting she felt on her own wound. His struggling didn't last long, and when he fell limp, Fayette stopped her sweep dust. She bent down, taking a knife out of her apron. Surprisingly, he was still conscious. One eye blinked open, taking in Fayette's approach. His raspy voice had none of the earlier sneer to it now. It was a quiet, strenuous thing. Please, I can pay." Fayette blocked his mouth with a finger and bent down lower, kneeling on top of him. "Shhh, quiet now. Thanks for giving away the details of your ability, fool. You should have heeded my words. Trash has no place talking." She plunged the knife in his neck, one final finishing strike, and pleading turned to gargles of blood. "One piece of trash cleared, nice job. Progress towards next level, 40%. She spent a second enjoying the sensation of knife-splitting flesh, then realized the outside world had gotten quite quiet. Oh, right, there was a whole other fight going on. She raised her head up, and saw a field full of collapsed and struggling guards, bound in thread or cloth. She also saw the stares she was receiving from Mireille and Olivia, who were standing right by her side. She carefully turned to them. This was a situation where it was all right to kill a noble, right? Two sighs answered her. "Well, it depends." Olivia asked. "How fast can you run?" Chapter 39 The Doctor Smiles. Olivia Nightingale had been living a relatively repetitive life for a good while. There was a flow to it. She would move to a new place, establish her practice in a place she could find patients, aid people for a while and earn a modest living, make attempts at furthering her knowledge through any means necessary, then run once authorities started to get wind of her. Or when public sentiment started to turn. One had to be observant. With such things, being chased out of a village by a pitchfork-wielding mob was not the most pleasant thing. Thus, one could call her rather experienced in the art of making a quick getaway. 6 years of experience had made it routine. She hadn't stayed in one place for over 3 months since she was 16. Thus, as she looked on her current circumstances, Olivia was not at all surprised to once again find herself running as fast as her feet could take her, hopping over fences and ducking behind alleyways, peering behind to see whether any guards were on her track. It hadn't taken her long to organize her allies for a quick getaway. She had helped douse Fayette's wound with a healing potion, knocked the more awake guards on the head a bit to help them forget, then spotted a nice out-of-the-way fence corner, beside which some handy crates had been placed. It was a quick up and over, and then they were in the streets. Moving through them was easier, she had the experience of many different escapades to lean back on. This time, however, things were different. First, she was not only keeping track of herself as she slowly made her way through the city, but she was also guiding her compatriots along. Compatriots? She could scarcely believe it. How long has it been since I've worked with somebody else? Ever since the old man got himself killed, it's just been me all alone, and my patients. Those don't tend to stick around, though. Maybe finding company was part of why she felt herself smiling? That was the second surprising thing about this getaway. Usually her getaways were a melancholy, sad thing, heavy steps weighed down by her work's futility, just another inevitable part of life's cycle. Now though, her steps had a spring to them. She felt she had finally accomplished something worthwhile, something concrete. Olivia was practiced at stealth and escape, so she only had to devote half her mind to it. She dipped behind cover, checked corners, motioned her comrades forward, all almost purely by instinct. Her actual thoughts were focused inwards, on contemplation. These strange circumstances she found herself in gave her a lot to ponder. She didn't know the two women she was leading through the city that well. To be honest, they had scarcely known each other longer than a day and a night. Still, she felt a new kind of connection there. The bonds of teammates, forged through trials of blood. Together, they had plotted an audacious plan, had the courage to attempt it, and so far, they had actually succeeded. As they made their way through the city, Olivia kept glancing behind her, eyes wandering to her new comrades. Yes, she had to make sure they were keeping up with her practiced techniques of urban escape, but in truth, her eye was on them much more than it needed to be. She wanted to know. Were they feeling the same elation she was? What emotions hid under those facades? The seamstress was somewhat hard to judge. Her face didn't betray much expression, as her eyes and mouth were stretched to a grim countenance, hiding what was really going on behind them. However, as Olivia tracked her more-minute movements, she could sense some of the hidden emotion. The way the woman's head kept glancing this way and that, nervousness. The way her hands were tightly wound into fists, excitement. The way her steps carried her, confident and head held high, triumph. The maid seemed a simpler sort, one more concerned with the moment than the big picture. She grimaced at the dirt on her uniform, she smirked at the factory behind them, and she frowned at the grimy streets she was running through. Above it all though were those moments when her gaze would focus on something intangible and far away, and a savage grin would overtake her face. Evidently, the maid was feeling it too, the thrill of success. What are you spacing out for? Are we getting close? Olivia snapped back to reality, and focused back on the seamstress who was huffing at her. Right, they had achieved most of their goals, and now came the other critical part of every plot, getting away with it. We're almost there, it seems like we've lost them. She replied and moved forward, ducking behind the next street corner. That was close. They almost saw me smiling like a silly fool. Focus, Olivia. The operation isn't finished before the patient is safely back at home. She peeked behind the next street corner, then ducked back behind a box, motioning for her allies to hide. They joined her as she silently counted to 5, after which a procession of guards rushed through the street, past them. Seems like word is finally starting to get out. We need to hurry. Won't be long now. She looked behind her, saw Mireille and Fayette obediently huddled down, and signaled for them to wait. She then crept back to the corner, peeked over, and this time motioned for the others to follow. It was only a few blocks more to her clinic, and she felt her steps being pushed forward by her team, growing faster, firmer and above all, more confident. Usually, scurrying away would have her feeling like a cornered rat, but now she too strutted with pride. Perhaps still somewhat like a rat, but this time like one who had managed to eat her way through a cheese storage. A soldier returning from victory. She got to the final stretch, saw it was free of watchers, saw her clinic, then rushed for the final bit. Mireille and Fayette also sped up, now sprinting by her side as if it was a race. Olivia almost laughed. She got to the door first, burst through, and then things got hectic. A nervous Elise bounded out of her bed, seeming a lot healthier already. Good, looks like she's healthy enough to move. Fayette ran to the laborer's side, and devolved into an excited chatter, while Mireille collapsed onto the floor, panting with exhaustion. Elise, we did it. Really? Are you? Olivia tuned out the chatter and got to packing. She had a lot of tools and would not leave anything behind. To an outside observer, her clinic may have looked like a cluttered mess, which was because it really was a cluttered mess. Somehow Olivia still had a knack for finding everything she needed, when she needed it. She moved like a whirlwind, taking out bags and filling them with her tools and tonics, slowly working her way through the room. Her packing was so furious and efficient that it took the others out of their stupor too, and 3 gazes turned to her. Olivia?" Mireille carefully asked. "Why are you packing in such a hurry?" Olivia stopped for a brief second, and turned to her. "What, did you think we were in the clear already? We aren't. We ran quite a bit, didn't we?" Fayette asked. "You killed a noble, apparently a grandson of the big lord himself. Do you think he'll let that pass in his own city? What's he going to do about it?" Olivia gave the maid a blank stare. "Lord Aumont is supposedly over level 50, and we are all still inside the bounds of his city. Do you know what kinds of abilities a high-level lord and his investigators and whatnot have?" Fayette shook her head. "Do you want to find out?" She shook her head again. "Then trust me. We do not want to be anywhere near here when they finally wake him up. Before you know it, we'll be down in the dungeon, drugged, get our nails pulled off, interrogated." All right, point taken," Mireille said, rising up back to her feet. "So, we have to get out of here, fast as possible? Faye, you've got our stuff in that bag of holding, right? It's an apron of holding, but yes. But, what about the guild? Do we need to tell them about the quest?" "What guild quest?" Mireille shouted. "You're not even doing any guild quests. There's a citywide search for us, why are you thinking about some guild quest?" "Oh, yeah, I suppose you're right. Will I be all right?" Elise asked, clutching her side as she paced. "Will they come after me and my family?" Olivia went back to packing. "You should get out of this clinic as fast as possible at least. If you lay low at your home for a few weeks, you'll probably be fine. Maybe. Hopefully." Olivia finished putting away the lasts of her tonics, hefted her bags up, then turned to look at her new allies. Fayette had somehow managed to get her uniform almost clean, some bits of spice still stuck in a cut at the side, and Mireille was busy checking through the maid's apron to see that everything was with them. Olivia took a deep breath. She had never gotten into a situation like this before, so she really wasn't sure how to phrase her question. "Well, I guess I'll just be direct. Hey, you two. This whole factory operation, I liked doing it. I think we did a good job here. Are you two going to do more things like this in the future?" Mireille frowned, and began to open her mouth, but Fayette made it first. "Of course we are!" she shouted, raising her broom up. "How could I become the ultimate maid if I ignored things like this? Though, mainly we're going to be hunters, but if a situation comes up," she whirled her broom around, switching it to a combat pose. "I'll beat any enemies of maids down." "Right, Mireille?" the seamstress sighed. "Well, I guess we are then. I doubt I could stop her if I tried." Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, and gathered her resolve. "A career as a hunter, hey? I guess that could be nice for a change. This country could use a more direct hand to guide these things, enough with being reactive." She grabbed her flask, took a swig, opened her eyes, then looked into Fayette's. They were outwardly a cool emerald green, but deeper within, she saw a fire. A fire burning with indignity, ready to lash out at the wrongs of the world. Olivia felt her own heart stirring, rising up from the gloom it had been stuck in for so long. Well, would you like to take a doctor along? Two's hardly a party, right? Fayette's eyes widened, and a smile returned to her lips. Olivia realized that she too was smiling. New party member gained. Olivia Nightingale. Class, Gutter Doctor. Level, 17. Skills. Medicine, 3/4. Comprehensive Diagnosis, Rank I. Basic Alchemy, Remedies, Rank 3. Basic Herbology, Rank 3. Surgery, 4/4. Bloodletting, Rank 4. Sterile Touch, Rank 3. Numb Pain, Rank I. Bone Cutter, Rank I. Hypocritical Oath, 1/4. Transfer Condition, Rank 2. Capstone Skills, 0/0. N/A. Free Skills, 3/3. Sneak, Rank 3. Forge Documents, Rank 2. Resist Poison, Rank I. Chapter 40 by Pelagni. Alright, hey, enough. Already. We're in a bit of a hurry here. Well, fine. Fayette reluctantly released Olivia from her crushing hug, while Mireille rubbed her forehead in the background. The seamstress had more practical concerns. So, Olivia, welcome to the team and all that, but how exactly are we going to get out of the city? I don't think assaulting the gates at this hour is going to be an easy task. The doctor took a moment to smooth out her ruffled dress, then took a swig from her flask. Do you think I would stick in a place like this without an exit plan? I didn't choose this dilapidated husk of a house to dwell in for the look, you know. Wait, Elise said, eyeing the room around her. Do you mean the Undercity? True, I think there are some tunnels under here too. Olivia let a small hint of smugness flash through her expression, before returning to her normally deadpan countenance. She walked to a corner in the room where she moved the remnants of a rotted wooden crate, revealing a passage underneath. Exactly. Some old mining tunnels run right under here, and they should lead outside to the riverbed, just a bit beyond the wall. Wait. Should lead? Mireille asked, peering into the hole with some hesitancy. Have you actually checked? Well, it's not like I've really had the time. Hey! Fayette interrupted. She waved her broom around, as if warding away pointless talk. No point debating it anymore. We're in a hurry, right? Nothing to it but to head in. She patted her pockets one more time to make sure she had everything on her, trotted over to the passage, then peered down. I've still got the lanterns from our previous jaunt underground, so we should be all set. She dug around in her pouch, then handed one lantern to Mireille, and one to Olivia. She almost started to hand out a third, before she hesitated. Oh, right. I guess this one is for me. She turned to Elise, the one who would be staying behind. The laborer looked fragile there, standing aided by a walking stick, watching the others prepare for travel. There was a gulf there, the people leaving off for new adventures, and the person staying behind. A tale as old as adventure itself. So, Fayette started, eyeing her brief friend's injury. I guess this is goodbye then. Elise looked caught out, surprised that she had gotten addressed. The young woman sighed. I guess it really is. She closed her eyes for a moment as if internally fighting over something. She gripped her stick tighter, then raised her gaze back up, this time holding some remnants of fire in it. You all really are amazing, you know? I didn't think it was possible for people like us to actually do things like this to fight back. She touched her recovering wound with her left hand, then winced back. Well, at least some people. Fayette felt some guilt hit her again. She felt at least a bit responsible for the girl's wound. Well, worrying myself over that won't help. We are in a hurry after all. She nodded at the woman, then turned back to the passage, lit her lantern, and jumped in. Mireille also said a brief goodbye, then followed. Last of all, the doctor also followed them in, sealing the passage closed behind them. "All right, Doc, which direction are we headed? I told you not to call me that." "Fine, fine, but still, what direction?" "I think that way." "You think?" Mireille huffed. "I thought you had this all planned out." "It is the right way. Let's go." Fayette had already begun moving, leaving the others to their debate. If they're not sure, what does it matter? The tunnel around her was similar to the ones they had traversed earlier, and that set her on edge. Did we ever get all the rats, I wonder? Are there more like that big one, just waiting and lurking in places like this? She kept her broom out and her eyes sharp, taking care to not let any sneaky rats or spots of tar escape her notice. The more she thought about it, the more she felt on edge, unsatisfied. As if something was buzzing inside her head. It took her a moment to realize the reason for it. Here she was, making an escape from town, but she really didn't feel like she was finished. Fayette paused for a moment, looking at the tunnel ceiling above her. Up there, the city of Palogny remained almost just as it was when she had arrived, dirty and poverty-stricken streets, cluttered and full ghettos, looming vagrants, and above all, those always visible plumes of smoke, rising higher and higher into the sky. What had she really achieved here? "Hey, Faye? What are you spacing out for?" Fayette twitched, awakened from her moody thoughts by Mireille poking her back. She turned to look back, meeting her friend's concerned eye. "Oh, nothing, let's keep moving." She moved on, quickening her pace to a brisk jog, but soon felt a poke at her back again. "What?" she asked, not stopping to turn back. "Don't say it's nothing, I know that look. Something's bothering you." "It's nothing important." "That always means it's important," Olivia pointed out. "Sadly, I can't diagnose ailments of the heart and mind. Yet at least." Fayette ignored the chatter and kept moving on, scanning behind every jutting stone for signs of danger. Now that Mireille had said it, she did really realize she was feeling bothered. Arriving in this city, it had filled her with an urge to fix things, clean things, make things work as they should. She had managed to kill some spooky rats, take out some thugs and stop one factory from polluting one district. Was that really enough? Could she really just leave like this, barely having started, not being thorough at all? "Oh, now I know," Mireille said behind her, snapping her fingers. She shuffled next to Fayette and bumped her with an elbow. "I knew I recognized that expression. That's your I didn't get to clean enough face, right?" Fayette sighed. "Look, it's just THA." Suddenly, she felt an overwhelming presence take hold. A searing pain hit her mind. The maid collapsed to the ground, as a growing, throbbing pain began to grow and expand deep within, inside her being. Not from her body or mind, no, it was emanating from her class. "Faye." She tried to stand up, to rise to her knees, but the crushing pressure she felt enveloping her was too much. It was in that same spot as before, what had been an itch when facing the noble guard captain. That spot where her class was missing something. A master. The intensity of the pressure started growing, and Fayette began feeling an instinctive urge, an instinctive need to obey. It was similar to when she had been forced to fight back in the mansion, but greater in strength, while lesser in focus. She was dimly aware of Olivia's and Mireille's touch on her as she slowly stood up to her feet, steadying herself on the tunnel walls. She slowly raised her broom up. Then she thrashed control back to herself, gripped the broom in her hand tighter, and hit herself on the head as hard as she could with her broom. Fayette came back to consciousness slowly, feeling drops of cool autumn rain on her face. She opened her eyes, and saw the clear starlight sky above her, framed amidst trees. She was laying down on her back and felt soft grass under her. She groaned, still feeling the remnants of a headache on her, and rose up. Footsteps neared her. "Thank the saints, you're awake." A gentle embrace enveloped her, and she blinked her eyes, slowly gaining focus of Mireille's worried face. She returned the hug. "Hey, I'm fine, I'm fine. All according to plan." "Damnation, that hurt." "What was that?" "Well, I can make an educated guess," Mireille said, releasing Fayette from the hug. She gently helped her friend up, supporting Fayette's head to let her see the view ahead. She pointed with her finger. "I think that had something to do with it." Fayette squinted her eyes, trying to make sense of what she saw ahead of her. First, she saw those distinct plumes of smoke, rising high up into the starlight sky. She could see the beginnings of morning in the horizon ahead. The first morning shifts at the factories must have gotten started. Next, she saw the riverbank, a good distance away from them, and the city walls rising up beside. They looked as grand as ever, imposing against any assault that might come their way. However, even those grand historic walls were dwarfed by the phantom figure looming over them. It was a giant in the shape of a man, one dressed in the finest livery afforded in this country, a face adorned with age and a grand beard. A very, very furious-looking face. The figure was a silvery blue thing, projecting from the center of the city, rising high up into the sky, from where it peered this way and that, examining the city around it, and growing angrier by the second. A glimmering field spread out from it, covering the city inside the walls wholesale. Ah! So that's what a high-level lord can do. What even is that supposed to be? She felt Mireille tremble slightly against her. However, Fayette didn't really feel all that frightened or intimidated by the thing. Sure, whatever this skill was, it might have almost forcibly wormed at her mind, and forced her to knock herself out. But that wasn't what she saw ahead of her, looming over the city. She didn't see an obstacle, an enemy to be overcome. She saw power. So that's how it is, that's the type of power one can wield in this world. I wonder, how small do the ails of the world seem from up there? She now realized how small she had been in her foray to Palagni, but that didn't really upset her. Now things made sense. Of course I can't do much more than handle a few rats and one factory, small little maid as I am. But that right there, that is power. Levels. She slowly stood up and noticed that her broom was next to her laying against a tree. She picked it up and felt at it in her hand, a sturdy tool, sure, but still a very mundane one. She turned back to the city, and imagined what it would be like to one day stand that tall, to wield power that overwhelming. She closed her eyes and pictured it. Small, tiny factories down below her, still spewing out that same troublesome soot in endless plumes. She raised her broom, then swept it across the sky, collecting the smoke into tidy balls. With power like that, what were some factories? They could bend, or break like the little toys they were. Hey, Faye? What are you doing? Fayette opened her eyes, returned to the moment, and turned around. Just thinking on the future. Where's Olivia? A shuffle in the woods answered. Right here. Went scouting for a bit, we can travel beside the road for a while, should keep patrols off our back. The doctor measured Fayette with her gaze, a skill flashing in her eyes. Are you feeling fresh enough to walk? As if I had just rested for a week, she answered, and started walking forward. The maid turned back for one last look, and felt her eyes meet with the gigantic lord figure for the briefest moment. The moment passed, the phantom figure looking away, none the wiser. Fayette, however, had made a vow with that brief moment. She would be back. Eventually. And one day, she too would stand that tall. She had gotten through step 1, getting an uncommon class for her first upgrade, but the future would be much tougher. A rare class, then maybe even a legendary class after that. Perhaps even the distances only legends trod, the realms of unique classes and saints. What would a legendary maid look like? Could she one day stand that tall, overwhelming power in her grasp? She was smiling again.